The Minnesota uproar is here. With the special election in Minnesota, improperly spent $113 million in federal funds on treatment facilities. Improperly. So it's interesting that Minnesotans across this land still want to support Governor Walz, but when we have the government that is backing up our stuff. Welcome to my podcast. I'm Nathaniel Olson. Welcome to Nate, Real Midwest, and let's get started in today. Let us start out with an article from the Star-Tribune that is saying that Minnesota improperly spent $113 million federal funds on treatment facilities. Let me say, that is your tax money, and you probably want to know where your tax money is going because we have a $6 billion deficit. So my question, ladies and gentlemen, when you guys are listening to the podcast, how do we go from a $21 billion spending budget to an $18 billion surplus to a $6 billion deficit in the state of Minnesota? Now, if Governor Walz has nothing on that he's doing for the Minnesota people, it's spending and spending. And we're spending way too much money and we're being taxed out the roof in the state of Minnesota, believe it or not. We need to get rid of property tax. We need to get rid of state tax in general. Now, hear me out. You might like Governor Walz and the stuff that he's doing, but he's ruining the state of Minnesota. And this is when it leads back to the three-letter agencies that we need to get out. The Department of Human Services. Now, what is the Department of Human Services? The Department of Human Services is nothing more than a system that is broken in 50 systems, but is used by people that are called by what it is saying that the systems is idea. Now, this is what I don't like with the Department of Human Services. The Department of Human Services do not work with people with disabilities, but that is not going to be the topic for today. We are going to talk about this spending. This spending. Let me say, it is not Donald J. Trump's fault. Donald Trump is not the problem of this spending deficit. Let me make clear of that. And that's what I want you Minnesotans to understand, that Donald Trump is not the blame of this. This is the blame of the politicians that we have elected on the party that you voted for the surplus on the Democrat Party that is wasting the Minnesota money. This is not Donald Trump's fault. And when Democrats are coming out and blaming Donald Trump for something that he has not done for the state of Minnesota, that tells me that you are not doing your research or doing the facts on the matter that is going on. Donald Trump is not at fault. This is the consequences of what is happening in our government, and you have to face them or accept the consequences that Governor Walz is doing this to destroy Minnesota. And if you do not think that is a problem, it is a problem, okay? This is the breaking point that people do not understand and don't want to understand. This is something that people don't get forth and understand what is going on because they want to blame the federal government when something is happening in the Minnesota state. The Minnesota state is the problem. I'm sorry if you do not like it, and I don't know what side you're on the aisle, and I do not care what side you're on the aisle. The governor needs to be held accountable for what he has done and what he has limited of the spending that he has done. Let's continue with that for a second. The spending is not the Republicans' fault. The spending is not the Democrats' fault. Well, let me rephrase that. It kind of is the Democrats' fault because they're the one that's allowing the spending and not putting a stop and allowing this investigation to stop. But it is not Donald J. Trump's fault. It's not President Trump's fault. He is not the governor of Minnesota. I wish he was because we would get a lot of stuff cleaned out and stuff. All right, let's make one sense about this, okay? When you're not willing to see what is happening in the state of Minnesota and the money that is being spent, the deficit that is happening, the stuff that is going on across this Minnesota nation and across the Great Lakes of Minnesota, you know there is a problem. You know there is a problem. And if you are not going to call out the problem and think that everything is okay and think it's Trump's fault that we're having this deficit, no, it is not. This deficit was here before long before Trump got in office and long before he was elected, we had the deficit, but now the deficit is coming out. We had a $15 million deficit, and now we're at a $6 billion deficit. Now, I have been to the committees and I've listened to what they are talking about, and the Democrats, I just cannot believe what they're saying. I'm telling you, Minnesota people, you need to listen and look what is going on and not focus on, oh, Doge, the federal government. Doge is doing what they have to do on the federal level. This is a state level problem. This is the spending problem. And if you do not see it, you are blind. I'm sorry. I'm calling you out. You are blind. This is a blinding point that people are being blinded about. Let's get into some issues. What else that is happening? We had an $18 billion surplus, okay? $18 billion. Now we have a $6 billion deficit. We subtract that by 6, we have lost $12 billion. $12 billion because of a $18 billion surplus, and now we have a $6 billion deficit. And guess who the Democrats wanted to blame? They blamed Donald Trump. They blamed Donald Trump because no, it is not Donald Trump's fault. It is your fault because you did not do the books right, you did not audit Minnesota right, and you did not do the spending allocated of what you did. You did not spend the money appropriately, and what is going on is Governor Walz is taking more money from the Minnesota taxpayers and using it for his own stuff, like a mansion that we did not pass in the Minnesota House of Representatives to be rebuilt and revamped in security. And now he's building a mansion in North Dakota using our money that we did not approve for him to pay for, all right? That's our taxpayer money, okay? But he's using millions of dollars to build a mansion. So it's interesting that he wants to run for governor in 2026, but he's building a mansion in North Dakota. Interesting. So my question here is, when we get into these points of Minnesota, who is the blame? It is not Donald Trump. It is the politicians, and our governor needs to be held accountable. And if you guys are not willing to hold them accountable, I'm sorry. You are too blinded in your own pride to hold your people accountable. That is the problem that we're seeing in the state of Minnesota, that everybody is praising Governor Walz for what he is doing, but when there is bigger issues and bigger stuff like medical kidnapping, guardianships that are abusing their clients, and the Department of Human Services, and we are praising Governor Walz for what he's doing for the state of Minnesota, there's a problem. The deficit is not President Trump's problem. It is Governor Walz and the administration that is running this state. Now it's time for you to vote in the right people and make sure it doesn't happen again and hold these people accountable, because Doge has not been in the state of Minnesota, but likely they might be coming in the state of Minnesota, because the stuff that is happening here needs to be investigated, in my opinion. Now, you might disagree with all the stuff that is happening in the federal government, us not funding Ukraine and stuff. That's your opinion. I understand that. But you have to understand that we been the Bank of America for almost 30 years and stuff. Like, we need to not be the Bank of America anymore, okay? But the deficit in the state of Minnesota is a big deal because we are being taxed off the roof. Do you know that we were not supposed to pay taxes and stuff? We were supposed to be paying federal taxes because of Mall of America, because we are allocating about a revenue of 40 million people that visit there a year, and that is a lot of money of revenue and stuff. But the Minnesota Democrats have came and taxed us so much out the roof. I can't believe people think this is the great state of Minnesota. This was a great state. Our education is getting really bad. The stuff that they want to teach kids is getting really bad. Kids are not knowing how to balance a check. Kids are not knowing how to budget their money. And you think that Governor Walz has done the best thing, and not forget putting tampons in the boys' bathroom. That is highly inappropriate. Boys do not need tampons. And what else can we do that is worse in the state of Minnesota? Well, I can name a few, but I don't think you want me to. But let me just put it in clearly of what is going on. If you are not seeing what's happening in the state of Minnesota is getting destroyed by Governor Walz and his stuff that he's doing. You might think it's good, but it's destroying you. One day you're going to figure out that, my goodness, if I did not know that this was happening, boy, I'm glad I listened to this podcast, because what is happening, and people who are not waking up, Governor Walz is destroying Minnesota. He's destroying Minnesota because his liberal ideology, what the Democrats believe, they're not for the American people. They're not like the RFK Democrats. They're not like the JFK Democrat people and stuff. They are so liberal, deep state people that are so corrupt and so willing to screw the American people and don't care about the American people. We have a governor who wants to get rid of disability rights, and his son is disabled. How does that work, ladies and gentlemen? But you're going to be saying, Nate, that's not true. It is true. Look it up. I've been on the floor testifying against that, okay? I know what's going on in our state because I have been doing my duty, going to the Capitol floor and reporting the stuff, what is going on, that you guys don't have to do the research, and I'm doing the research for you. You're welcome. Just saying. But this is the stuff that is coming out, all right? You need to understand that Doge has done nothing to Minnesota, okay? They have not been in Minnesota. The problem with the deficit is it is the governor's fault. Governor Walz needs to be held accountable of what has happened. And it is not the fault of the American people. It is a fault of the people that voted in the administration of Minnesota. It is Governor Walz and his administration that need to be held accountable and stuff. And that is what is happening. The Democrats do not care about you. They only care what is best funding for them. We can talk about women's rights if we want me to go there. We can talk about other stuff. We can talk about disability rights. There was a bill on Congress floor that's giving the rights for disability people to travel out of state. When on earth are we giving that right back? Come on, people. Are we in communism right now? No, we are not. But I think we are leading to it if we have Governor Walz run this. I'm going to tell you this. If Governor Walz gets in for a third term for the state of Minnesota and stuff, Minnesota is done. We're gone. Minnesota is done. It's gone. We will not have a Minnesota state. We will have a governor who's turning his backs on his Minnesota people and funding his own pockets. That is the podcast for the day. Follow for the next episode. I hope you guys are having a great day. God bless.